The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Mercantile in Randsburg, California, and Victoria Sanders pressed her gloved hand against the raised tissue that ran from her left temple down to her jaw, a nervous habit she had developed over the past 3 years. The June heat of 1887 bore down on her black traveling dress, making her wish she had worn something lighter, but the somber color helped her blend into shadows, helped people look past her rather than at her. She clutched the worn leather satchel containing all her worldly possessions and the carefully folded letter from Lucas Zimmerman, the rancher who had agreed to marry a woman he had never seen. She had been honest in her correspondence, brutally so. The scar that marked her face was impossible to hide, a permanent reminder of the fire that had taken her family and nearly taken her life when she was 20 years old. Now 23, she had spent those years working in a textile factory in Boston, enduring the pitying glances and the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. When her employer had suggested, with false kindness, that perhaps she might find better prospects out west where men were less particular, Victoria had swallowed her pride and written to the matrimonial agency. Lucas Zimmerman had responded within 2 months. His letters were brief but kind, detailing his ranch 15 miles outside Randsburg, his herd of cattle, and his need for a wife to help build a life in the high desert country of the Mojave. He had never once mentioned her scar after her initial confession, writing only that he looked forward to meeting a woman of obvious courage and honesty. Now, standing in the dusty street with the afternoon sun beating down and the other passengers dispersing to their various destinations, Victoria wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. A dog barked somewhere nearby. A piano played badly in one of the saloons that lined the main street. Men in dusty work clothes moved past her, and she saw their eyes catch on her face, then slide away quickly. Miss Sanders. She turned toward the voice and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad beneath a faded blue shirt, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He removed the hat as he approached, revealing sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of honey in sunlight. His face was weathered, lined at the corners from squinting into the desert sun, but his expression was open and uncertain. "Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Yes, madam. Lucas. I hope you had a decent journey." He held his hat in both hands, and she noticed his knuckles were scarred and calloused from years of hard work. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with the lean build of a man who spent his days in the saddle. Victoria lifted her chin, letting the full light fall across the left side of her face. Better to have this over with now. The journey was long but uneventful. She watched his eyes, waiting for the familiar flinch, the momentary revulsion that even the kindest people could not quite hide. Instead, Lucas Zimmerman looked at her steadily, his gaze traveling from her eyes to the scar and back again without any change in his expression. "You are more lovely than your letters suggested," he said simply. Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. "Mr. Zimmerman, there is no need for false flattery. I am well aware of my appearance." "Lucas, please. And I was not offering flattery, Miss Sanders. May I call you Victoria?" "You may." He gestured toward a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses at the end of the street. "I thought we might see the Reverend this evening, if you are not too tired from your travels. My neighbor, Martha Crawford, has agreed to stand as witness. She runs the boarding house and has prepared a room for you tonight. The ranch is too far to reach before dark, and I thought you might appreciate a night to rest before we make the journey tomorrow." Victoria nodded, grateful for his consideration and surprised by it. That would be acceptable. Lucas picked up her satchel as though it weighed nothing and offered his other arm. She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. They walked slowly up the dusty street, and she was acutely aware of the eyes that followed them, the whispers that surely speculated about the scarred woman and what desperation had driven Lucas Zimmerman to send for her. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. 6 years. I came out from Missouri after my father died. My mother had passed when I was young, and there was nothing holding me there. I worked for other ranchers for a couple of years, saved my money, and bought the land when old Samuel Peterson decided to move to San Francisco to live with his daughter. "You run the ranch alone." "I have 2 men who work for me. Miguel has been with me for 4 years. Good man, knows cattle better than anyone I have ever met. And there is a younger fellow, Danny, who has been working for me about a year, learning the trade." Lucas helped her up into the wagon and placed her satchel carefully in the bed. "It is not much, the ranch. But the land is good and the herd is growing. There is a house, 4 rooms, solid built, a barn and a good well." He climbed up beside her and took the reins, guiding the horses through the street with practiced ease. Victoria watched his hands on the leather straps, strong and sure, and felt a strange flutter in her chest that she firmly suppressed. "I should be clear about expectations," she said, keeping her voice low. "I can cook and clean. I can sew and manage household accounts. I will work hard and earn my place." Lucas glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Victoria, you are not coming to my ranch as a servant. You are coming as my wife. A wife you have never met. A wife with a face that frightens children." He pulled the horses to a stop in front of a 2-story building with a painted sign declaring it to be Crawford's boarding house. Before she could move, he turned to face her fully, his eyes intense. "3 years ago, I was helping move a herd through a narrow canyon when a rockslide spooked the cattle. A young calf went down, and without thinking, I went in to get it out. A steer caught me in the ribs, broke 3 of them, and punctured my lung. I was laid up for 2 months, coughing blood and certain I would die. Miguel sat by my bed every night, and when the fever got bad, I screamed things I do not even remember. When I finally healed enough to get back on a horse, I was weak as a kitten and had to learn my strength all over again." He paused, his jaw working as though the words were difficult. "What I learned in those months was that strength was not about never falling down. It was about getting back up, about facing each day even when it would be easier to quit. Your letters told me you lost your family in that fire, that you were trapped in the building and had to find your way out through flames and smoke, that you worked in a factory for 3 years, saved every penny, and had the courage to come 2,000 miles to meet a stranger because you wanted more from life than pity." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the edge of the scar on her cheek with his fingertips. "This tells me you are a survivor. It tells me you are strong. And yes, Victoria, it is beautiful because it is part of you." She felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "You do not know me." "No," he agreed, "but I would like to, and I hope in time you will want to know me too." Before she could respond, the door to the boarding house opened, and a plump woman with graying hair and a warm smile emerged onto the porch. "You must be Miss Sanders. Come in, come in. I have fresh water for washing and a dress laid out that should fit you well enough for the ceremony. Lucas, you scoot along now and let the lady have some privacy." Lucas climbed down from the wagon and came around to help Victoria descend. His hands on her waist were gentle but firm, and when he set her on the ground, he did not immediately step away. "I will return in 2 hours," he said quietly. If you have changed your mind, if you want to take the stage back east, I will pay for your ticket and hold no ill will. But I hope you will stay." Victoria looked up into his honest face and felt something shift inside her chest, some small frozen place beginning to thaw. "I will be ready in 2 hours." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise over the desert, slow and warm and full of promise. He handed her satchel to Martha Crawford, settled his hat back on his head, and walked back to the wagon with a spring in his step that had not been there before. Martha ushered Victoria inside, chattering cheerfully about the weather and the town and the shocking price of sugar these days. The boarding house was clean and simply furnished, with lace curtains in the windows and the smell of baking bread in the air. Martha led her up a narrow staircase to a small room with a washstand, a bed covered in a faded quilt, and a dress of deep blue cotton laid out carefully. "That was my daughter's dress," Martha said. "She married a man from Sacramento last year and left most of her things behind. You are welcome to it." "I could not possibly," Victoria began, but Martha waved her objection away. "Nonsense. A woman should have something pretty for her wedding day. Now, I will heat some water for you to wash, and there is a screen in the corner for privacy. Take your time, dear." When Martha had bustled out, Victoria sank onto the edge of the bed and pressed her hands to her face. Her heart was beating too fast, and her thoughts were a jumble of hope and fear. Lucas Zimmerman's words echoed in her mind, his gentle touch on her scar, the sincerity in his eyes when he called her beautiful. She had not dared to hope for kindness. She had expected, at best, a man who would tolerate her appearance in exchange for her labor. Instead, she had found something she did not know how to name, something fragile and precious that terrified her because she did not trust it to last. But he had given her a choice. He had offered her an escape if she wanted it. And that, perhaps more than anything else, made her certain she would stay. Martha returned with a pitcher of warm water and helped Victoria out of her dusty traveling dress. As she washed away the grime of the journey, Martha kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking about Victoria's trip and telling stories about Randsburg and the surrounding ranches. "Lucas is a good man," Martha said as she helped Victoria button the blue dress. "Lost his father young and had to be the man of the house at barely 15. Came out here with nothing but determination and made something of himself through honest work. He deserves a good woman." "I hope I can be that for him," Victoria said softly. Martha turned her around and smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, honey, I think you are exactly what he needs. Now let me do something with your hair." She brushed out Victoria's dark brown hair, which had grown long during her years in Boston, and pinned it up in a simple but elegant style that left a few curls loose around her face. When she was finished, she stepped back and nodded with satisfaction. "There now, you look lovely." Victoria looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. The blue dress brought out the color of her eyes, and Martha's skilled hands had softened her appearance. But the scar was still there, raised and red, impossible to ignore. "He really said it was beautiful?" Martha asked gently, watching Victoria's reflection. "He did." "Then believe him, dear. Lucas Zimmerman is not a man who says things he does not mean." A knock at the door announced Lucas's return. Victoria took a deep breath, smoothed the skirt of her borrowed dress, and went downstairs to marry a man she had known for less than 3 hours. The church was a small wooden structure at the end of Main Street, whitewashed and simple. Reverend Thomas was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He asked them the required questions, his voice soft in the quiet sanctuary, and when Victoria spoke her vows, her voice did not waver. Lucas's hand was warm and steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. His own vows were spoken clearly, his eyes never leaving hers, and when the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Lucas leaned down and kissed her forehead with such tenderness that Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. Martha cried openly and hugged them both, and the Reverend shook Lucas's hand and wished them well. They signed the register, Martha and the Reverend serving as witnesses, and then they were walking out into the cooling evening air as husband and wife. Lucas took her back to the boarding house, where Martha had prepared a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables. They ate in the small dining room, just the three of them, and Martha regaled them with stories of her own wedding 30 years prior. As the evening wore on, Victoria felt some of her tension ease. Lucas was an easy man to be with, she discovered. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and genuine. When Martha finally declared it was time for bed, Lucas stood and took Victoria's hand. "I will come for you in the morning after breakfast. The ride to the ranch takes about 3 hours. You are not staying?" Victoria asked, then felt foolish for the question. Lucas's expression was serious. "I meant what I said earlier. I hope in time we will have a true marriage in every sense. But I will not rush you, Victoria. We are strangers yet, and I want you to feel safe with me." The relief that flooded through her was mixed with something else, something that might have been disappointment. "Thank you," she managed. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, his lips warm through the thin fabric of her glove. "Sleep well, wife." She watched him walk out into the night, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness, and wondered how she had gotten so lucky to find such a man in such an unlikely way. Martha showed her back to her room and left her with a candle and a warm smile. Victoria changed into her nightgown and lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and turning the gold ring on her finger. She was married. To a cowboy she barely knew, in a town 2,000 miles from everything familiar. And yet, for the first time in 3 years, she felt something that might have been hope. She slept better than she had expected and woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Martha had laid out a split riding skirt and a practical blouse, more borrowed items from her absent daughter, and Victoria dressed quickly. Her own clothing, packed carefully in her satchel, was entirely inappropriate for ranch life, and she made a mental note to ask about ordering more suitable garments when they reached the ranch. Lucas arrived as she was finishing breakfast, looking freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He accepted coffee from Martha and sat across from Victoria, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Did you sleep well?" "I did, thank you." "And you?" "Like a stone." He grinned, and she realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger and almost boyish. "I am eager to show you the ranch. I think you will like it." They said their goodbyes to Martha, who hugged Victoria and made her promise to visit town regularly. Lucas helped her into the wagon, her satchel and a basket of food from Martha stowed in the back, and they set off as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. The road out of Randsburg was well traveled at first, passing other ranches and the occasional miner heading into the hills. But as they drove farther from town, civilization fell away, leaving only the stark beauty of the high desert. Joshua trees raised their twisted arms to the sky. Creosote bushes dotted the landscape in dusty green clusters. In the distance, mountains rose in shades of purple and brown. "It is so different from Boston," Victoria said, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "You miss it?" "The city," she considered the question. "I miss what it was before the fire, but that Boston no longer exists for me. After my family died, the city became a place of ghosts and memories." I do not miss the factory or the boarding house where I lived. I do not miss the noise or the crowds. Tell me about your family, Lucas said gently. Victoria had not spoken about them to anyone in years. People in Boston had known, of course, but after the first awkward condolences, the subject had been dropped, left to fester in silence. But something about the vast openness of the desert and Lucas's quiet presence made the words come easier. My father was a bookkeeper. My mother took in sewing. I had two younger brothers, Thomas and James. Thomas was 15 when he died. James was 12. Her voice caught, and she took a breath before continuing. It was winter, January, bitterly cold. Someone on the ground floor left a lamp burning too close to the curtains. The fire spread so quickly. I woke to smoke and flames, and I tried to reach my brother's room, but the hallway was an inferno. I went out the window instead, climbed down the ice-covered fire escape. I thought they would be right behind me. She touched her scar without thinking. A burning beam fell as I was climbing down. It caught my face and shoulder. I fell the last 10 feet and broke my wrist. When I looked up, the whole building was engulfed. No one else made it out. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I am so sorry, Victoria. I cannot imagine the pain of that loss. I survived when they did not. Sometimes I do not know if that is a blessing or a curse. It is a blessing, Lucas said firmly. Your family would want you to live, to be happy, to find joy again. How can you be so certain? Because if I had family who loved me and I was the one who died, I would want that for them. I would not want them to spend their lives grieving. He glanced at her, his expression earnest. You are here, Victoria. You are alive. That means something. She blinked back tears and nodded, not trusting her voice. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking and swaying over the uneven road. The sun grew hotter, and Lucas stopped near a cluster of rocks to let the horses rest and drink from a stream that wound through the landscape. He helped her down from the wagon and led her to a relatively flat rock in the shade. Martha's basket yielded bread, cheese, and dried apples, and they ate while the horses cropped at the sparse grass near the water. Tell me about the ranch, Victoria said. What will my days be like? Well, I rise before dawn most days. The cattle need tending, and there is always work to be done. But you would not be expected to work the herd. The house is yours to manage as you see fit. There is a garden that could use a woman's touch. The previous owner's wife had one, but it has gone wild since they left. There are chickens, so you would have eggs. Miguel's wife, Rosa, lives in a small house about a mile from the main house. She is a good woman, and I think you would like each other. She speaks English well, and she can teach you about the plants and animals here if you are interested. I would like that, Victoria said. She hesitated, then asked, What do Miguel and Danny know about me? They know I sent for a mail-order bride. They know her name is Victoria Sanders and she is from Boston. He met her eyes steadily. They do not know about your scar, but only because it did not seem relevant to mention. It will not matter to them, I assure you. How can you be sure? Because I trust the men I hire, and because if they have a problem with my wife, they will be working elsewhere. The fierce protectiveness in his voice surprised her, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. You would dismiss them, for me, without hesitation. They finished their meal and continued the journey. The landscape grew more rugged, and Victoria saw cattle in the distance, moving slowly across the scrubland. Lucas pointed out landmarks, explaining the boundaries of his property and showing her where the best grazing was. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they crested a rise and Lucas pulled the horses to a stop. There, he said simply. Home. The ranch house sat in a shallow valley, protected from the worst winds by low hills on three sides. It was built of wood and stone, larger than she had expected, with a wide porch running along the front. A barn stood nearby, solid and well-maintained, and she could see a corral with several horses. Smoke rose from a chimney, and as they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn, raising a hand in greeting. "That is Miguel," Lucas said. Miguel was perhaps 40, with weathered brown skin and a broad smile. He helped Victoria down from the wagon with courteous respect, his dark eyes kind. "Senora Zimmerman, welcome. Rosa has prepared food for you and the house is ready." "Thank you," Victoria said, touched by his thoughtfulness. A younger man appeared from behind the barn, leading a horse. He looked barely 20, with red hair and a face full of freckles. This had to be Danny. "Madam," he said shyly, ducking his head. "Welcome to the ranch." Victoria smiled at him, noting the way his eyes widened slightly when he caught sight of her scar, but how quickly he recovered. "Thank you, Danny. It is good to meet you." Lucas carried her satchel inside, and Victoria followed him through the door. The interior of the house was dim after the bright sunlight, but clean and orderly. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. "Rosa comes once a week to help with heavy cleaning and laundry," Lucas said, setting her satchel down. "But she has kept the place livable while I was in town. I know it is not fancy." "It is wonderful," Victoria said honestly. After years in a cramped boarding house room, the space felt palatial. Lucas showed her the bedrooms. The largest had a wide bed covered in a quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. "This is the main bedroom. I have been sleeping in the other room, but now that you are here, this one is yours. I will continue in the smaller room until you decide otherwise." Victoria looked at the bed, then at Lucas. His expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "Lucas, we are married." "Yes, and when you are ready for all that entails, you need only tell me, but I will not assume, Victoria. You have been through enough. You deserve to have a choice." She did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. He smiled, that warm sunrise smile, and gestured toward the kitchen. "There is stew warming on the stove, courtesy of Rosa. Are you hungry?" They ate together at the table, and Lucas told her more about the ranch, the rhythm of the days and seasons, the challenges of raising cattle in the desert. He spoke of his plans to expand the herd, to build a better irrigation system for the garden, to perhaps add a few rooms to the house if the ranch continued to prosper. "I want to build something lasting," he said, "something that will endure, a legacy. Children." Victoria asked, her heart beating faster. "Someday, yes, if we are blessed with them." He looked at her intently. "I would like children, but I would also be content with just you, Victoria. You are enough." She excused herself soon after, pleading exhaustion from the journey, and retreated to the main bedroom. Lucas bid her good night and disappeared into the other room, leaving her alone with her swirling thoughts. The bed was comfortable, the quilts soft and smelling of sage. Victoria lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. The horses moving in the corral, an owl hooting somewhere nearby, the wind rustling through the desert plants. And beneath it all, the faint sound of Lucas moving around in the next room, so close, and yet giving her the space she had not known she needed. She fell asleep thinking of his hand on her cheek, his voice calling her scar beautiful, and wondered if it was possible to fall in love with someone in a single day. The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of new experiences and small discoveries. Victoria woke each morning to find Lucas already gone, out riding the range with Miguel and Danny. He returned for midday dinner, which she learned to prepare using the supplies in the well-stocked pantry, and the lessons Rosa patiently taught her during her weekly visits. Rosa was a treasure. She was perhaps 35, with warm eyes and a ready laugh, and she took Victoria under her wing without hesitation. She taught her which plants could be eaten, which had medicinal properties, and which to avoid. She showed her how to tend the chickens, how to preserve food in the desert heat, and how to coax life from the stubborn garden soil. "Lucas is a good man," Rosa said one afternoon as they worked side by side in the garden, pulling weeds and watering the struggling vegetable plants. "Miguel says he has never seen him so happy. You are good for him." Victoria sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "He is kind to me, more than I expected." Rosa gave her a knowing look. "He is in love with you, surely you see this." "We barely know each other. Sometimes the heart knows faster than the head." Rosa reached over and touched Victoria's hand. "Do not be afraid of happiness, my amiga. You deserve it." In the evenings, after the work was done, Lucas and Victoria would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. He taught her about the stars, pointing out constellations and telling her the stories behind their names. She told him about the books she had read, the dreams she had harbored before the fire had stolen her old life. Slowly, carefully, they were building something together. Trust, yes, but also genuine affection. Victoria found herself watching for Lucas during the day, listening for the sound of his horse. She learned the way he moved, the cadence of his speech, the small gestures that meant he was tired or worried or content. And she saw the way he looked at her, as though she was something precious, something to be cherished. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Victoria was preparing supper when Lucas came in from the range earlier than usual. His face was grim, and there was a tension in his shoulders that made her straighten from the stove. "What is wrong?" "We have been losing cattle, just a few here and there over the past week. At first I thought it was coyotes or cats, but today Miguel found evidence of riders." "Someone is rustling my herd." Victoria's hand went to her throat. "What will you do?" "Miguel, Danny, and I will take turns riding patrol at night. It is the only way to catch them." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I am sorry, Victoria. This is not what I wanted for your first month here. You think they will come here, to the house? No. Rustlers want cattle, not trouble with the law. As long as you stay inside at night with the door barred, you will be safe." That night, Lucas rode out after dark, his rifle across his saddle. Victoria lay in bed, listening to every sound, starting at every creak of the house settling. She did not sleep until she heard him return just before dawn. The next few nights followed the same pattern. Lucas and the men took shifts, and the strain began to show in the lines around Lucas's eyes and the tension in his jaw. On the 4th night, Victoria could stand it no more. When Lucas came in for dinner, she met him at the door. "You are exhausted. Let me help." "There is nothing you can do," he said gently. "This is ranch business. I can keep watch from the house. I can ring the bell if I see anything suspicious. It is not much, but it would free one of you to patrol a larger area." Lucas looked at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "All right. But you stay inside, and at the first sign of trouble, you ring that bell and then hide. Promise me." "I promise." So she joined the watch, sitting by the window in the dark house with a blanket around her shoulders and Lucas's spare rifle across her lap. He had taught her to load and fire it, though he made her promise she would only use it as a last resort. The hours dragged by, and she fought sleep, drinking the strong coffee Rosa had left for her and straining her eyes into the darkness. It was the 5th night when she saw them. 3 riders, moving slowly through the north pasture where the cattle had been grazing. Victoria's heart hammered as she grabbed the rope for the bell and pulled hard. The clanging split the night, loud and insistent. She heard shouts, the thunder of hooves and then gunshots. Victoria pressed herself against the wall, gripping the rifle and praying desperately that Lucas was safe. The shooting seemed to go on forever but was probably only minutes. Then silence, thick and terrible. The front door burst open and Victoria nearly shot Lucas before she recognized him. He was breathing hard, but he was unharmed. Relief made her legs weak. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, crossing the room in 2 strides and pulling her into his arms. "Did they come near the house?" "No, I am fine. What happened?" "We caught them. 2 ran off, but we got the 3rd. Danny is riding for the sheriff in Randsburg now. The man we caught will hang for rustling." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "You did exactly right. You warned us in time. If we had not been ready, they might have gotten away with a dozen head or more." "I was so frightened," she whispered. "When I heard the shooting, I thought you might be hurt. I am fine. We are fine." His thumb stroked gently over her scar, that gesture that had become familiar and comforting. "You are trembling. I thought I might lose you. I just found you and I thought I might lose you." Something shifted in Lucas's eyes, some door opening that had been closed before. "Victoria, you are not going to lose me. I am here and I am yours for as long as you want me." "I want you," she heard herself say. "I want all of this. A real marriage. I want to be your wife in every way." He searched her face, making sure she meant it, and whatever he saw there must have convinced him because he lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper, more urgent. Victoria dropped the rifle and wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the longing and fear and relief that surged through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel obligated." "I have never been more certain of anything." He kissed her again, then scooped her up in his arms and carried her to the main bedroom. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other in the darkness with hands and whispered words. Lucas touched her scar with reverence, kissing the raised tissue and telling her again that she was beautiful, that she was perfect, that he was the luckiest man alive to have her. And Victoria, who had believed herself incapable of ever being wanted in that way, discovered that passion and desire were not diminished by scars. If anything, Lucas's careful attention to every part of her, including the parts she had tried to hide, made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window. Lucas's arm was around her, holding her close, and Victoria rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I think I have from the moment you stepped off that stage and met my eyes without flinching." "I love you too," she whispered back, and knew it was true. Somehow, impossibly, she had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with this man. The sheriff arrived the next day with Danny and took the rustler away to face justice. The 2 who had escaped were never caught, but they did not return to trouble Lucas's ranch. The summer heat intensified, and Victoria settled fully into her role as rancher's wife. She learned to ride, though never as well as Lucas, and sometimes accompanied him on shorter trips around the property. She improved the garden with Rosa's help until it was producing tomatoes, beans, and squash in abundance. She made curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors, and turned the house into a real home. Lucas taught her to dance in the evenings, humming a waltz tune while they moved around the main room, laughing when they stumbled. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, surprising her with the hidden beauty of the harsh landscape. He held her every night, and she woke every morning grateful for the life she had found. When autumn came and the heat began to ease, Victoria realized she had missed her monthly courses for the second month in a row. Rosa confirmed what she suspected, her experienced eye noting the subtle changes in Victoria's body. She told Lucas that evening on the porch, their now customary place for important conversations. "I am with child." He went very still, and for a moment she worried that he was not ready. Then he whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, kissing her face and laughing like a man who had received the greatest gift in the world, a baby. "We are going to have a baby." He set her down carefully, suddenly anxious. "Are you well? You need to rest. Should you be standing?" Victoria laughed and kissed him. "I am fine. Rosa says I am healthy and strong. The baby should come in late spring." That winter was the happiest of Victoria's life. Her belly swelled with their child, and Lucas treated her like spun glass, worrying over every little thing. She assured him repeatedly that pregnancy was not an illness, but he could not seem to help himself. He built a cradle from smooth pine wood, carving intricate designs into the headboard. Rosa taught Victoria to knit, and she made tiny booties and caps. Miguel and Danny were overjoyed at the news, and Danny shyly presented Victoria with a carved wooden rattle he had made. Martha came out from town to visit, bringing baby clothes her own grandchildren had outgrown. The baby arrived on a warm May evening in 1888, after a labor that was long but not complicated. Rosa attended her, along with a midwife from Randsburg, and Lucas paced the porch outside until the baby's first cry split the air. He burst through the door to find Victoria exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "A son," she said. "We have a son." Lucas approached the bed with something like awe on his face. He looked down at the baby, who had stopped crying and was making small snuffling noises, and Victoria saw tears in his eyes. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and touched the baby's downy head with one finger. "What should we name him?" "I thought perhaps James, after my brother. James Lucas Zimmerman." Lucas looked at her, understanding the significance of the choice, and nodded. "James it is. He will know about his namesake, about his brave mother and the family she lost." Little James was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Victoria had worried during the pregnancy about whether her scarred face would frighten her own child. But James looked at her with the uncomplicated love of an infant, and she realized that to him, her face was simply Mama. The scar meant nothing to him, except that it was part of the person who fed him and held him and sang to him. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Lucas's herd increased, and he hired 2 more men to help with the work. He added rooms to the house as he had promised, including a real bedroom for James and a parlor for receiving guests. Victoria became known in Randsburg as a skilled seamstress, and women began coming to the ranch to commission dresses and alterations. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Lucas took Victoria back to Randsburg for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant. Martha watched James for the evening, and Victoria wore a new dress she had made herself, a deep green that Lucas said brought out her eyes. They sat in the restaurant, holding hands across the table, and Lucas produced a small wrapped package. "For you." Inside was a locket, gold and delicate, with space for 2 small photographs. "I thought you might like to have pictures of our family inside. There is a photographer coming through Randsburg next month. We could have a portrait made." Victoria opened the locket and found that Lucas had already placed something inside. A pressed desert flower, the kind he used to bring her in their early days together. She looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. "I love you so much," she said. I never thought I could be this happy. Some days I wake up and think it must be a dream." "It is real," Lucas assured her. "You are real. Our love is real, and it is going to last the rest of our lives." They had their portrait made the following month. The three of them posed formally. Lucas standing with his hand on Victoria's shoulder as she sat holding James on her lap. The photographer was professional and discreet, positioning them so that Victoria's best side was toward the camera, but not making it obvious that he was doing so. When the finished photograph arrived weeks later, Victoria stared at it for a long time. She looked happy in the picture. Not hiding, not ashamed, but simply a woman with her family. The scar was visible, yes, but it was only one part of the whole. She saw herself as Lucas saw her, a survivor, a mother, a woman who was loved. She placed one copy of the photograph in the locket and hung the other on the wall in the parlor where everyone who visited could see it. James grew into a bright, curious boy with his father's honey-colored eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, Rosa delivered the baby at the ranch, and Lucas was beside Victoria the whole time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. Their daughter arrived on a crisp November morning, smaller than James had been but just as healthy. They named her Grace, and she had Lucas's smile from the very beginning. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew. The ranch continued to prosper. Miguel's own children and grandchildren became part of the extended family that gathered for celebrations and holidays. Danny married a girl from town and built a small house on the far edge of the property, staying on as foreman when Miguel retired. Victoria never lost the wonder of her life. Sometimes, when Lucas held her at night or when her children laughed at the dinner table, she thought of that terrified girl stepping off the stage in Randsburg, certain that she was facing a life of mere tolerance at best. She thought of how wrong she had been. Lucas had not just accepted her scar. He had truly seen it as part of what made her who she was, strong, resilient, beautiful. And in seeing her that way, he had taught her to see herself the same way. When James was 10 and Grace was 7, they added a third child to their family, a daughter they named Rose, who arrived during a rare winter snowfall and seemed to bring sunshine with her wherever she went. The years continued to pass. James grew into a tall young man who worked the ranch alongside his father, learning the trade with the same dedication Lucas had shown. Grace proved to be a gifted artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the desert and its wildlife. Rose was the family daredevil, climbing trees and riding horses with fearless abandon. Victoria watched her children grow with a heart full of gratitude. She had survived the fire that had taken her first family. She had survived the years of loneliness and grief. And she had found, in the most unlikely place, a love that had healed her and given her a new family, a new purpose, a new life. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Lucas took her back to the spot where they had stopped on that first journey to the ranch. The stream still burbled over the rocks, and the desert spread out around them in endless shades of brown and gold and green. "You remember the day we came through here?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist as they stood looking at the landscape. "You were so nervous, so certain that this was all a mistake." "I was terrified," Victoria admitted. "I thought you would take one look at me in the full light of day and regret sending for me. Instead, I fell in love with you before we even reached the ranch." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria. You and the children and this life we have built together. I thank God every day that you were brave enough to get on that stage." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the new lines that the years had etched there, the gray just beginning to show in his hair. "I was not brave. I was desperate. You were both. And I am grateful for your desperation because it brought you to me." He kissed her there in the desert sunlight, and Victoria kissed him back with all the love and passion that 15 years of marriage had only deepened. They returned to the ranch to find chaos. Rosa, now elderly but still sharp as ever, was trying to keep Rose from climbing onto the roof while Grace and James argued about something Victoria could not quite make out. The house was noisy and messy and full of life. Lucas looked at Victoria and grinned. "Home." "Home," she agreed, and they waded into the cheerful disorder together. The children grew and eventually left to build lives of their own. James took over management of the ranch, marrying a rancher's daughter from Johannesburg and building his own house on the northern section of the property. Grace moved to San Francisco to study art, but returned frequently to visit, eventually settling in Randsburg and opening a studio. Rose married a surveyor and traveled with him throughout California, sending letters full of adventure and mischief. Victoria and Lucas grew old together in the house that had become home. They added grandchildren to the family, and then great-grandchildren, each one a blessing. Lucas's hair went completely gray and his steps grew slower, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at Victoria. Her scar faded with age, becoming less angry red and more silvery white, a part of her face that no longer drew stares but simply was. She wore it with pride now, this mark that had once seemed like such a curse. It had led her to Lucas, after all. It had been part of the journey that had brought her to this life. On a warm June evening in 1925, 38 years after Victoria had stepped off the stage in Randsburg, she and Lucas sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lucas held her hand, his grip still strong despite his 70 years. "I have had a good life," he said quietly. "A very good life." "So have I," Victoria said. She was 61 now, her dark hair streaked with white, her face lined with age. But she was content in a way she had never imagined possible on that long-ago day when she had fled Boston to escape a life of pity and loneliness. "You ever regret it, coming out here to marry a stranger?" She turned to look at him fully, this man who had seen past her scar to the woman beneath, who had called her beautiful when she believed herself damaged beyond repair, who had given her a love that had sustained her through nearly 4 decades. Not for one single moment. He smiled and kissed her forehead, then her scarred cheek, then her lips. "I love you, Victoria Zimmerman. I always have and I always will. And I love you, Lucas Zimmerman. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." They sat together as the stars came out. 2 old people who had been young and brave and lucky enough to find each other across 2,000 miles and a lifetime of hurt. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the grandchildren tucked into beds in the main house for their visit. Victoria thought of the scar that ran from temple to jaw, the mark that had once defined her entire existence. It was still there, would always be there. But it was no longer what she saw when she looked in the mirror. Instead, she saw a woman who had been loved well and had loved in return. A mother and grandmother, a survivor who had not just endured but had thrived. The mail-order bride who had brought a scar across her cheek had found a cowboy who called it beautiful. And in that simple act of seeing her truly, he had given her the greatest gift, the chance to live a life full of love, purpose, and joy. As the night deepened and the desert air cooled, Lucas and Victoria went inside together, closing the door on another day in a life that had exceeded every hope and dream. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, and they would face them together as they always had. In the bedroom that had been theirs for 38 years, Lucas helped Victoria prepare for bed with the tender familiarity of long marriage. They lay down together in the darkness, and he pulled her close, her head resting on his shoulder as it had on their wedding night and every night since. "Tell me again," she whispered, as she sometimes did in the quiet moments before sleep. "You are beautiful," Lucas said, his voice sure and steady. "Every part of you, including the scars that made you strong. You are the love of my life, and I am blessed beyond measure to call you mine." Victoria smiled in the darkness and let her eyes close, safe in the arms of the man who had changed her life simply by seeing her as she truly was. Outside, the desert night was full of stars, the same stars that had watched over their first night together and every night since. And in that small ranch house in the high desert of California, two people who had started as strangers and become soulmates drifted off to sleep, surrounded by memories of a life well lived and secure in a love that would outlast the passing years. The ranch that Lucas had built and that Victoria had helped make into a true home would pass to their children and grandchildren, a legacy of hard work and determination. But the real legacy was the love story that had begun with a scarred woman and a kind cowboy, a story that would be told and retold in the family for generations to come. Because Victoria and Lucas had proven that beauty was not about perfection. It was about courage and resilience and the willingness to be seen. And love was not about finding someone who overlooked your flaws. It was about finding someone who saw them and loved you more deeply because of them. In the morning, they would wake to a new day. The sun would rise over the desert, and life would continue in its beautiful, messy, imperfect way. There would be grandchildren to spoil and chores to complete and quiet moments stolen together between the demands of the day. But tonight, in the peaceful darkness, there was only the steady breathing of two people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. The mail-order bride and the cowboy who had seen past her scar to the beautiful woman beneath. Two souls who had been brave enough to take a chance on love and had been rewarded with a lifetime of happiness. Their story was not without hardship or sorrow. They had faced rustlers and drought, illness and loss. But through it all, they had faced it together, their love growing stronger with each challenge overcome. And if someone had asked Victoria, in those final peaceful moments before sleep claimed her, whether she would change anything about her life, she would have answered without hesitation, not a single thing. Because every joy and every sorrow had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life that she had built from the ashes of tragedy. The scar on her face had healed long ago, the tissue knitting together into a permanent reminder of the fire that had taken her family. But the wound in her heart had healed too, slowly and gently, under the patient care of a cowboy who had looked at her and seen beauty instead of damage. Lucas's breathing deepened beside her, and Victoria knew he had fallen asleep. She lay awake a few minutes longer, savoring the warmth of his body and the security of his presence. Tomorrow she would tell him about the letter she had received from Grace, announcing that she was expecting her third child. Tomorrow they would ride out to check on the new calves with James. Tomorrow there would be bread to bake and mending to do, and 1,000 small tasks that made up the fabric of her days. But tonight, there was only this: peace, love, and gratitude for a life that had turned out so much better than she had ever dared to hope. Victoria closed her eyes and let sleep take her, knowing that when she woke, Lucas would be there. He would always be there, this man who had looked past society's cruel judgments and seen the truth of who she was. The man who had called her scar beautiful and meant it with his whole heart. And in the years to come, when their children and grandchildren asked how Victoria and Lucas had fallen in love, the answer would always be the same: he saw me when I thought I was invisible. He loved me when I thought I was unlovable. And in doing so, he taught me to see and love myself. That was the real gift Lucas had given Victoria. Not just his love, though that was precious beyond measure, but the courage to believe she deserved to be loved, the strength to stop hiding and start living, the freedom to be fully and completely herself, scar and all. As the years turned into decades and their hair grayed and their steps slowed, that fundamental truth remained unchanged. They were partners, lovers, best friends. They had built a life together from nothing but hope and hard work, and it was a beautiful life, rich in all the ways that mattered. The ranch would endure. Their children would carry on the legacy. And the story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who called her Scar beautiful would become family legend, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, and that true beauty was measured not by appearance but by strength of character. In the deep of the night, as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert breathed its ancient rhythms, Victoria and Lucas slept peacefully in each other's arms. Two people who had taken a chance on love and won the greatest prize of all, a lifetime of happiness with the perfect partner. And if the walls of that ranch house could talk, they would tell of laughter and tears, of hard work and tender moments, of children growing and love deepening. They would tell of a woman who had arrived broken and left whole, not because her scars had healed, but because she had learned that scars were nothing to be ashamed of. They were simply proof that you had lived, that you had survived, that you were strong enough to face whatever life threw at you and come out the other side. Victoria had faced fire and loss and rebuilt her life from ashes. Lucas had looked at her and seen not a damaged woman but a survivor, a fighter, someone worth loving with his whole heart. Together, they had created something lasting and true, and that, in the end, was the only thing that mattered. Not the scar that marked Victoria's face, or the opinions of strangers, or the pity she had once endured. What mattered was the love they had built together, the family they had raised, the life they had lived. As dawn approached and the eastern sky began to lighten, Victoria stirred in Lucas's arms and smiled even in sleep. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And the scar that had once seemed like such a curse had proven to be a blessing after all, because it had led her to the one man in all the world who could see past it to the woman beneath. The one man who would love her not despite her imperfections, but because of them, because they were part of the incredible journey that had made her who she was. The mail-order bride had found her cowboy. The scarred woman had found acceptance and love. And together, they had built a life that proved beyond any doubt that beauty was not about a perfect face, but about a courageous heart. That was the legacy Victoria and Lucas would leave behind. Not just a prosperous ranch or successful children, but a love story that transcended appearance and circumstance to find the deep and lasting truth that connected two souls across all the barriers the world tried to erect between them. And it was a beautiful legacy indeed.